Let's talk about all the horror movies I've watched recently. I kicked off the month watching Trap from 2024. This is the new M. Night Shyamalan horror movie starring Josh Hartnett as a serial killer dad who brings his daughter to a concert and then learns it's a trap set to catch him. This movie is not that good. The movie is ridiculous and it's over the top. Nothing makes sense and it's just silly, and I think that it's stupid, but Josh Hartnett is amazing. The first half of this movie is so good, it's so fun to watch. The third act is where the movie goes off the rails and loses me, but I think if you go into the movie looking to have fun and you can suspend your disbelief, you might have fun with this. There are no twists, it's pretty straightforward. Josh Hartnett is amazing though. I love him. If Josh Hartnett wasn't in this movie, I would not have watched it. I will just say that. He is the saving grace. He's the reason why I like this movie. And then I was on a Josh Hartnett kick, of course, always. So I rewatched The Black Dahlia from 2006, and this movie is not good. It is about the Black Dahlia, but the movie isn't really about the Black Dahlia. It's about the people involved in her case, and it's just more about their relationships and this corrupt cop system and blah, blah, blah. But I wanted more about Elizabeth Short and them actually trying to solve the case, but it's too long, it's convoluted, and it's just not good, sadly. But you know, Josh Hartnett's good. Then I revisited Red State, which is currently streaming on Tubi. The movie hasn't been available to stream in years, so I was so excited to see it pop up. This is the Kevin Smith horror movie about a group of teenage boys who think they're meeting a woman for sex, and it turns out she lured them there for her church, and they get kidnapped, and essentially they are brought forth in this culty church where they're brought there to repent their sins, and then like the FBI gets involved and it becomes like a action horror movie. This movie is multiple movies in one. I think it's strongest when it focuses on the three teenage boys and their horrific situation. It just gets a little too crazy in the second act, and it doesn't really stick to anything. It's just kind of bleh. Then I revisited It from 2017. I love this movie. It's the perfect summer horror movie, and this is set on the Losers Club, a group of 7 friends who essentially come together to defeat this alien creature known as Pennywise, who can take form of anything that terrifies you. It's like the perfect coming of age story, and it's horrifying in many ways, and the cast in this is so good and so funny. I love them so much. And it's actually brutal, like they actually kill kids, which was shocking at the time. Then I watched Dead Air from 2009, and this is kind of like Ponypool but not as good, and it stars Bill Moseley as a shock jock radio host who is essentially going about his daily show, and this weird outbreak happens that turns people into like violent zombies, and then he starts reporting on it. He gets callers calling in telling him what's going on, and they have to figure out how to survive. I would have liked this movie more if it went more the Ponypool route, where we don't actually see the activity outside but we hear it from callers calling in. But it focused on too much stuff. It also focused on these terrorists that were coming in, and they planted this chemical that turned people into these zombies, and it was just too much. It was too messy. I think Bill Moseley is fun and the cast is fun. I like the setting, but I wish it was more contained. Then I watched Tahoe Joe, which is a found footage horror about a man or 2 men who go into the woods looking for a person who disappeared, looking for Bigfoot. And it's just an interesting documentary style found footage horror. It's very low budget. I think they did a decent job with it. I like the end of it. It gets a little crazy. I love Bigfoot as a creature, so I like any movies focused on Bigfoot, and this one just had a little bit of realism to it. I think they just came out with a sequel as well, which I have not watched yet. Then I checked out The Camp Host on Tubi, which is about a couple who are van lifers, and they pull into this campsite that is run by this crazy woman who is essentially like, she wants to punish people for not following the rules of keeping nature clean and all of that fun stuff. And I think that this one is really solid. I think the cast is excellent, and there's some really fun characters along the way. It gets a little messy at times, but it's so fun and lighthearted and hilarious that I had a blast watching it. I watched Villains from 2019. This stars Bill Skarsgård and Micah Monroe as a young couple who they have just robbed a bank, and they're looking for solace. They're looking to find a car, and they see this house on the side of the road, and they go and check it out for a car. When they get inside, they realize that the home belongs to some crazy people, and then the homeowner shows show up, and it goes crazy from there. This one is really funny and surprising, and Bill Skarsgård and Micah Monroe are so funny. They're so charming, and I want to see them in more comedies because they are excellent. I revisited Strangeland from 1998, which is a movie that messed me up as a kid. This movie is centered on a serial killer who uses the internet to lure his victims to his house where he tortures them. And this movie terrified me because it came out at a time where I had just got the internet. I just had gotten AOL, and I would chat with strangers in chat rooms. And you think you're talking to people your age, but the other end could be anybody. And this movie scared me straight. It made me not want to talk to people. So I think Dee Snider is terrifying. And the movie was more scary back then. It was more disturbing back then. Now it's a little cheesy, and Dee Snider's character is a little cringy, especially with some of his dialogue. But I think at the time it was very scary. I think it's a time capsule for sure. Then I revisited Beetlejuice in anticipation of Beetlejuice 2. And this is just an iconic horror movie that is perfect for the Halloween season. Michael Keaton is incredible as Beetlejuice, and it centers on a couple who have just died, and they are trying to get the new family who has moved into their home out. So they call Beetlejuice in for help, and things go wrong. Things get out of control. It's just so fun. The music, the set, the setting, the costume design, the performances from everyone. It's just such a fun, fantastical world, and Michael Keaton is amazing. I love that he's only in the movie for like 15 minutes total, but he is such a big, larger-than-life presence that it feels like he's in the whole movie. It's crazy. I love it. I'm so excited for part 2. Then I watched Milk and Cereal, which is a new indie found footage horror movie that is currently available on YouTube. It's making the rounds on the internet right now. I think a lot of people are enjoying it, and I did as well. It's about a YouTube prank show that are pulling a prank on their friend, and then he ends up pulling a prank on them, and it goes horribly wrong. Like, not what you were expecting. I think it's a solid found footage entry. I think the production design is pretty good. Like, it doesn't feel low budget. It feels like you're watching actual YouTubers do their thing, and it just gets out of control. I think that the story has some fun moments and unique twists. I love the lead character. I think he's very good at being creepy and unsettling, and the look that he has at certain points of the movie is just very, very unsettling. I like the ending, and yeah, I think it's a really solid found footage horror movie, and I'm excited to see what these guys do next. Then I revisited Talk to Me, which is the A24 horror movie about a group of kids who summon ghosts through an embalmed hand at a party, and then they get a little in too deep, or at least one of them does, and she starts having hallucinations and starts questioning reality. This one is really disturbing, and there's some really shocking moments in it. I think it has some powerful, haunting imagery of death and dying. There's one moment where we get a glimpse of hell that is just, it has haunted me since I've seen it. It's so scary, and I think the lead actress is amazing. You feel every emotion she's going through, and it's just a sad, bleak movie, and I love it. I revisited Fallen from 1998, which stars Denzel Washington as a cop who is trying to catch a serial killer who is basically committing crimes in a similar fashion as a serial killer he already caught and who was executed. And it turns out there's some religious stuff at play, and it might be a demon who is jumping from person to person by touch. I think that this is a solid horror thriller of that time period. Denzel Washington and everyone else in the cast is just amazing. We have Donald Sutherland, we have John Goodman, we have James Gandolfini. Like, that cast is immaculate. And I think that Denzel Washington, you can't help but root for him in whatever he's in. And he's just great in this, and he has like a brother that he's very close with, and there's just a lot at stake for him. I think that the story is interesting and unique, but it got a little confusing for me at times, but I love the idea, and it has a very bleak ending that has always stuck with me. It felt very bold for the time, and I think it's worth watching, especially during spooky season, because it is filled with those fall colors. It's so beautiful. Then I checked out the Glenarma Tapes, which is about a group of college students who learn that their two professors who are going to meet up in the woods, and they decide they're going to follow them in there so they can record them doing the dirty so that they can blackmail them. But when they get in the woods, they find them doing something completely different that they never expected, and it becomes a crazy night. I thought that this was an interesting entry in the found footage world. It has a pretty decent cast where a cast can make or break a found footage horror movie. Like, these feel like actual college students. Like, they're not insufferable. The acting is pretty on point. I love the woods setting, and it becomes a little bit culty, I will say. Things got a little confusing for me towards the end when all of the craziness is happening, but there's a nice little conclusion towards the end, and I thought it was a pretty solid entry. Then I revisited the Slumber Party Massacre, which was a part of Joe Bob's Last Drive-In Night Marathon, which aired the other night, where they played 6 horror movies back to back in celebration of their 6-year anniversary, and that was the first movie. I love this movie. It's a classic. It's a feminine horror classic. It's directed by a woman, and it's about this driller killer who he targets a group of young girls, and they fight back, and I love watching them fight back. And apparently the director has stated she has no feminist messaging to this movie, but it's like, you watch the movie, the killer uses a drill that he often holds in between his legs like a penis. Sorry, it's very phallic, and the things he's saying to these girls, he's like just very gross. And there's a moment where one of the girls attacks him, and she cuts the drill like she's castrated. It's just, how is this not a feminine? Like, the messages were so clear, but she didn't even try. It's just so good, and I think it's paying homage to that Slumber Party sleazy horror of that time period, but also doing something a little bit different. And I just love it. The second movie was When Evil Lurks, which is also good, but I fell asleep, so I'm not going to count it as watching it fully, but you should watch it. It's still just as dark as the first time I watched it. And then I finished off the month with another found footage horror movie called Long Pigs, and this one was a pleasant surprise. It's basically like Behind the Mask, Leslie Vernon, and it's about a group of two filmmakers who are documenting this known cannibal who invites them in to film his life as a cannibal. So we see him targeting victims, killing them, and how he goes through the process of slaughtering them like animals and eating them, and we just get to see glimpses of his life, and it was so good. Like, the cast is excellent. It felt like a legit documentary, and the lead actor is just so endearing to watch. Like, I couldn't keep my eyes off of him. It's not overly gory and bloody as I suspected or I expected it to be, but the story is really interesting, and I love the way it ends, and I loved this movie. I'm so surprised it took me this long to see it, so you can watch that on YouTube. And there you have it. Those are all the horror movies I've watched recently. I am so excited to head into spooky season because there are so many more movies that I need to watch. So let me know what movies you've watched lately, if you checked out any of the movies I talked about on today's video, and let me know what movies you're planning to watch for spooky season. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye.